And I want to begin this hour by setting a scene. Quote, "We're under siege. We're being invaded by our own military," end quote. Now, you'd be forgiven for thinking those were words describing North Korea. But they came from a witness describing a scene unfolding in Chicago this week. Those were the words of a man named Darrell Ballard speaking to the ABC affiliate in Chicago. Earlier this week, federal agents stormed an apartment complex in the South Shore neighborhood of Chicago. Witnesses say residents were separated into groups and led to vans, according to several witnesses who spoke with ABC 7. This came with a military-style name. The Trump administration called it Operation Midway Blitz. One woman, distraught from seeing her children herded into vans, from seeing children herded into vans, told ABC 7 that she pleaded for the agents to find their morality. Quote, "That's all I keep asking," she said. "Where's the human?" In response to her pleas, she said one of the officers laughed and said, "F them kids." Later, we'd learned that this show of force resulted in 37 valid arrests, according to CNN, citing a Department of Homeland Security memo. But meanwhile, the debris and the wreckage left behind resembled the aftermath of a military invasion. Personal belongings destroyed, electronics missing, birth certificates and other belongings scattered throughout the hallways like the ruins of a battle. Tuesday, September 30th, 2025, will be remembered as one of the darkest days in modern American history, right up there alongside the worst civil rights era atrocities where we were raised to believe belong to the past. All of this unfolded just hours before Donald Trump told a room full of America's top generals and admirals that American cities should be used as training grounds for them. Generals and admirals flown in from every corner of the globe only to be told their new mission is not adversaries like China or Russia or even terrorism. Their new mission is us, the American people, the so-called enemy within. In the 249 years of our republic, this week, this speech was our democracy's Rubicon moment. The expression "crossing the Rubicon," coined to describe Julius Caesar crossing the Rubicon River on January the 10th in the year 49 BC in violation of Roman law, may one day fall into disuse, replaced by Operation Midway Blitz, September 30th, 2025, to describe a day when a country's military turns inward. Before Trump's remarks, the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, strutted on stage, pacing, ranting, calling out fat generals, degrading women in combat, railing against dudes in dresses. It was nuts. But one overlooked line from his speech demands some special attention. The self-proclaimed devout Christian looked at all those credentialed generals and admirals in front of him and said to them, "You kill for a living," as if he were a proud father praising his son's accomplishments. Most generals and admirals would never characterize their service in that way. Most soldiers and sailors, in fact, have never killed anyone, and those who have grapple with PTSD. The goal of joining the U.S. military is to defend, not to kill. Taking a life during combat is not something to be reduced to a boast. It's a grave responsibility, one carried with weight and often lasting trauma. Reducing military service to a Neanderthal war cry reveals more about Hegseth, who likes to call himself the Secretary of War these days, than it does about the actual proud U.S. military that he claims to head, the one that's made up of both men and women. But let's be clear, Hegseth is a sideshow at best. The libertarian scholar Tom G. Palmer put it best, quote, "Hegseth will be purged eventually, like others who create dictatorships for megalomaniacs. He's too stupid to know it." Or as the former Bush administration official and McCain campaign advisor Steve Schmidt put it, quote, "Pete Hegseth is contaminating the military with his radical proselytizing of extremist Christian nationalist poison. It is an acid on the military of the great republic and a volunteer force. There has never been a more unfit Secretary of War in American history." Steve, of course, put Secretary of War in quotes because that's what Hegseth has now taken to calling himself. Hegseth's performance aside, the entire point of that disgraceful day, men and women with decades of service yanked from their posts around the globe at taxpayer expense, was to condition America, to condition its generals to accept the unacceptable, to treat their fellow citizens as the enemy within. Citizens they are sworn to defend. Just days before Donald Trump's speech to America's generals, he issued an executive order naming ideas themselves as suspicious. He also empowered the Attorney General to label groups domestic terrorist organizations, a thing for which there is no underlying law and hence no associated judicial process. How convenient. He is criminalizing dissent, ideology by ideology, belief by belief. According to Steve Schmidt, quote, Donald Trump's speech promises to turn American soldiers into murderers and killers of American citizens in American cities where the American parents who raised many of those soldiers live and reside. What Donald Trump promised is an American Tiananmen Square. And he looked at America's generals and admirals and he said, you are going to do it on my order, end quote. Trump is clearly done hiding his authoritarian ambitions. Cleta Mitchell, a former Trump lawyer who aided him in trying to overturn the 2020 election, said as recently as September on a podcast that Trump might, quote, exercise some emergency powers to protect the federal elections going forward, end quote. The Posse Comitatus Act of 1878 was meant to keep the U.S. military out of domestic law enforcement, to stop presidents from using troops as a personal police force. The Insurrection Act of 1807 was written as a narrow exception, allowing deployments only in extraordinary cases like invasions or true insurrections. Trump is now signaling that he's ready to invert that framework, to use the exception as the rule, to twist the Insurrection Act itself into a weapon for crushing political opposition. Similarly, Trump has stopped even trying to impress his own base, whose livelihoods he's keen on wrecking. Look at the tariffs. Farmers, 78% of whose counties voted for Trump are being wrecked. China bought $12.6 billion worth of soybeans from the United States last year. Since Trump became president, zero. Entire states like Iowa are watching their biggest market vanish. Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley, Iowa's longest-serving senator, an old-school Iowa conservative, is now asking why Trump is bailing out Argentina, a country like America heading toward authoritarianism, while U.S. farmers, largely Trump's own voters, drown. Farmers don't want one-time bailouts. They want and need stable markets. Or look at health care. A Kaiser poll shows that even MAGA voters, 50% of them, want Obamacare subsidies preserved. Yet Trump's one big beautiful bill guts Medicaid and leaves families unable to pay for basic care. His contempt for his own supporters is open and brazen and on the record. All of this is to say that Trump knows full well that he and MAGA Republicans are likely to lose in a free and fair election. And he is showing us openly and in full view exactly what he intends to do. Use the military against us. Rewrite the rules to cling to power. Crush dissent by labeling ideas themselves as terrorism. They've told us we're the enemy. If they're not sugarcoating their actions and motives, why should the rest of us? Steve Schmidt joins me now. He's the co-founder of the Save America movement, host of the podcast The Warning with Steve Schmidt, and previously served as a senior campaign advisor for the late Senator John McCain's 2008 presidential bid. Steve, it is good to see you. Thank you for being with us this morning.
Good to see you.
Steve, I want you to forget everything I just said. I want you to forget this, because what you have been doing this week is telling Americans, do not be despondent. Do not lose faith. Do not shrink in the face of these absurd threats made by Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth, because you think that we're in a strong position to fight back.
Of course we are. Abraham Lincoln pointed out that in this country, with popular sentiment, anything is possible. And without it, nothing is possible. And so the American people, at the end of the day, will have to make a decision about whether they support all of the things that you talked about or whether they will reject it. When you think about Pete Hegseth this week in the military, what a young officer is taught from the beginning of their service is they go to their men. They get out of their foxhole and go to the men. The secretary goes to the commands, doesn't order the generals to him to preen on a stage, reinterpreting the movie Patton in the beginning. And so all of the theater is un-American. It is an assault on the ethos, the values, the core ideals of the military. That Pete Hegseth, the person who is a living desecration of those values, was up there. The culture, more than anything else, values accountability. That's what those officers have spent their life succeeding at. Great responsibility with tremendous accountability imposed. And that's what Pete Hegseth is the antithesis of. But it's a dangerous moment. Stephen Miller at the Charlie Kirk Memorial event gave a full-on Nazi speech. It was hilarious. And since then, the threats have grown and the promises to turn the military against the people, including the obscenity of a military raid with men rappelling out of helicopters. Who were they? What force did they belong to? What agency? Were they military? They certainly weren't ICE. ICE doesn't have that capability or training to arrest 37 people. Time to wake up on all of it.